Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. My name is Cody Sizemore. I'm joined here with my lovely co-host, Maria Casillas. And today we are celebrating because this is the 200th episode of us doing the Financial Coaches Podcast. Let's celebrate good times. Come on. Yes, it's a good day. And we're so excited to jump in with everything today. We have a little bit of a different show kind of scheduled for you guys today. Really, we're just kind of looking back at some of our episodes that we've done really in the last 100 episodes, really, since our last celebration that we did with the one and only Chris Hogan. And we're just going to be kind of talking about our favorite episodes that we did, or some of the ones that we feel are the most important, one of the two, and kind of revisiting those, bringing those conversations back up into play and just sending it home for you guys, because you guys deserve to know that if there was one that we talked about that we thought was really important and you happen to miss it or you haven't listened to it at all, then here's your chance to go back and listen to those. So with that being said, if this is your first time listening to this to this podcast, what an awesome one to listen to for the first time. Seriously, so, and we just want to welcome you in, saying thanks for, listening today, and hopefully you continue to listen to us so that when we celebrate 300 episodes, that you can do it with us and you can be like, I'm a pro now, I'm an every weeker, right? Which brings me to my next group of people that I want to really say thank you to, which are those every weekers. And those are the people who've been with us for a long time and have been listening to this episode or to this podcast every single week. So maybe you were like, I remember listening to the one where you guys interviewed Chris Hogan, and I was even before then too. Well, if that's you, hey, round of applause to you. Super good job. Glad you're still here, so thank you for that. And of course, also, the last thing I'll say before we get into all this kind of good conversation is, hey, we love connecting with you as well. And a really, really good place to do that would be our Facebook group, which is simply called the Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits. So make sure you join in there, say hello, ask some questions, reach out to us, join in some of our coaches meetups that we do every month, or the book club, or whatever it might be. We have a lot of cool things going on in there as well. So all that to be said, let's kick this celebration off with the one and only Maria Casillas. Maria, how you doing?
Well, hello. I'm really good. Thank you for asking. Exciting to be here. I'm just shocked that it's been that many episodes. And it's funny because I'll listen to podcasts that have thousands of episodes. So this almost sounds like, what's 200?
Yeah.
But for me, it means we've shown up 200 weeks in a row. And that is, when you look at how many years that is, I think that's pretty cool, seeing as it started literally on a suggestion of, hey, I don't know what's out there. And I said, let's do it. Or I said, I actually just challenged you to do it.
Yep.
I don't know what I was thinking, but you're like, hey, would you do it with me? I'm like, sure. And I half thought you were kidding. And now 200 episodes later, here we are. So I think that's really fun. And I'm really excited to be here as well. So yeah, it's been, I think the other funny part about this is I've never met you. I don't know if our listeners know that or not, but yeah, in person, of course.
Yes.
But it's just so funny to me because here we are 3 years into this thing, and we've heard people talk about our banter back and forth on here. And I was thinking, we were just chatting today about the weather where I am and the weather where you are, and I'm like, we've never actually met in person. So that's just kind of fun little fact too.
Mm-hmm. It is strange. It doesn't feel like that, but it is what it is.
I know.
Maybe one of these days we'll be able to connect. So
it's the days we live in. But I do think it would be kind of fun to do some sort of reunion. Hey, maybe for our 300th one, we do it live, so we have to meet each other in person.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we throw that out here on the podcast, and then we just say that it's a goal of ours now, and then we're going to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like it.
Anyway. Yeah. So what should we talk about today? What are our favorite episodes? What are some of the things that have jumped out to each of us?
Yeah. So I've got two that I want to talk about. I know that you also have two that you want to talk about. I figured that maybe we just kind of start with one. Maybe,
Okay.
you can start with one if you'd like, and then I
Sure.
can share one, and then we can kind of go back and forth. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's perfectly fine. So when you open it up, you were saying that some of this is either ones that are favorite or things that have kind of jumped out to us as being super valuable, important. As I was looking through some of the stuff to try to figure out which ones were the favorite, I obviously didn't have all the time in the world to go and listen
Hmm.
again to every single one. So I relegated myself to just looking at the titles or the descriptions that were there. And for our listeners, there are obviously the titles that you have, but then, we have a document that kind of lists all of the different sort of descriptions, but then some of them have an actual title and some of them don't. And this one jumped out at me and it was called Statue of David. And I looked and looked and looked for our episodes for Statue of David. I'm like, I don't see a titled Statue of David. And it all came clear when we realized what we actually called it. But it was just seeing that prompt was the thing that reminded me of how important that conversation was
Hmm.
to me, and I think to some of our audience as well. So I will just tell you, those of you who are listening, you're not going to find the words Statue of David anywhere in our descriptions, but you will find this on episode 129. I believe it's called Embracing Your True Form as a Person and Coach. And I don't like if you guys know anything about what the Statue of David is. I don't even remember the book specifically. I think I was reading a fiction book.
Hmm. It was.
And is that what it was? Okay.
Mhm.
So there was a spot in there where somebody was describing what Michelangelo did and how he got to the Statue of David. And it was kind of like, if I remember correctly, just like a giant block of concrete. Is that right? Was it
Yep.
concrete? I don't even know what it's made out of.
Hmm.
I sound so ignorant right now. But it was a giant block, and Michelangelo literally just chiseled away at the rock a little bit by a little bit. And that's how he came to Michelangelo. It's almost like he released him. He was always in there and he just kind of released him from who he was. So there was that part about chiseling away, but there was also the part in that book where I believe he said something about if he had tried to hang on to the old pieces that had been chiseled away, that it would have like weighed him down. Was it something along those
Hmm.
lines?
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of things in here that are super impactful to
It
me.
was the
Before
idea
I,
of like taking those pieces and putting them into a backpack and
yeah,
then holding on to them, kind of thing.
right,
Yeah.
right. That it's okay to let those things go, because if he had held on to all of the chiseled away pieces, you never would have seen the true David inside of that block of rock. So I think that that's so important to us as coaches, and this is a really good place to start this episode because it talks about embracing who we actually are. And sometimes it's not just embracing who we are, sometimes it's having to chisel away in order to find out who we are. And I don't know about you, Cody, but I know for myself, this entrepreneurial journey has been so much of that. Just chiseling away, like think, oh, this is who I am. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is the direction I'm supposed to go. And then I'll chisel a little bit, and the good Lord will be like, nope, that's not it. That's not where you're supposed to go. And
Mhm.
it's not always like, the next shiny object. It's just recognizing what am I good at? What do I need to improve on? What do I need to let go altogether? And it's just been this long journey. And so I have a feeling that a lot of our listeners probably have experienced something similar or are about to, or maybe they are in the middle of that right now.
Yeah. So there's two things that came up that I want to kind of like expand off of a little bit. We won't spend super amount of time on these because obviously we don't want this to be like a 2-hour episode or anything like that.
Yep.
But kind of like a 30,000-foot view with a few pieces of feedback, I guess you could say. But my two things are this: building off of what you just said around letting certain things go. So you mentioned the entrepreneurial journey, and as you have gone through it, you've started to learn more about like who you do want to be, who you don't want to be, what you do want to do, what you don't want to do, what brings value to you, what doesn't bring value to you, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree. And you know me, I mean, by now we haven't seen each other in person, but you know me, right? And you
Mhm.
know that I'm a very driven person.
Mhm.
You also know that I kind of thrive off of just putting myself in uncomfortable situations and just going all out. So, for example, like that marathon or the 75 hard stuff, or even just like constantly trying to beat myself, which I think we talked about, either last week or the week before that, of comparison, right? Like I'm
Mhm.
always trying to beat myself for what I did before and trying to improve on it and scale it and all that good stuff. So you know that about me. However, do you also remember it was about this time last year actually when I told you that I needed to scale back how much I'm working,
Mhm.
scale back my goals, scale
Mhm.
back, a lot of just how much I'm putting into this whole business. Do you remember that period
Yes,
of time?
because you had to realign some of the values with your family and stuff, if I
Correct.
remember correctly. Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. So my big vision and the purpose of why I was so like all in with this was that I was like, hey, like I want to I want to impact people's lives as much as I can, first and foremost. But I also want to make enough so that I can take that money and invest it into real estate so that I could
Mhm.
retire early, very early, like before I'm 40, and really free up my time so that I can spend time with my family and my aging parents and all that kinds of stuff and give them the world,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I was doing that for a long time and I was working myself to the bone and really wasn't spending as much time with my family that I really should have been
Mhm.
or even really wanted to. And it was my wife who approached me and said, hey, I've noticed this too. And I was like, yep, here's why I'm doing it. And I told her, and she goes, well, you're sacrificing what you want now so you can have that later. Like you're sacrificing, if what you really want is your time with your family, well, you're
Mhm.
not having that in the process of the destination. So what's the point?
Mhm.
And I was like, dang, this is why I married you. Right? Like, you know, so, and that was a really big learning curve for me. It was
Mhm.
uncomfortable. It was unlike anything that I've ever done in my life before. I've never, ever said, let me slow down.
Mhm.
I've never, ever said, let me scale back. I've never done that. But after I made that decision and also that commitment to my wife and to my family, um, I have been a lot happier. I've been a lot happier. And I think that just kind of goes to show with this whole idea of like not carrying those pieces that you've chiseled away.
Mhm.
Like I chiseled that away. I still have that drive. I still have that passion. I still have that ambition, but I'm not carrying it so much that it's going to weigh me down anymore. Right.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that's really important. So that was just one thing that I wanted to say. I don't know if you want to say anything on that or not, but
Oh, the only thing I'll add to that is that you allowed yourself to see the beauty that was already there. And I think that is sometimes when we are so focused on what we're working for, we forget to just bask in the beauty of what we already have or who we already are or who we're already surrounded by. And I do believe that sometimes is the tragedy for some people who are always working to, like you said, spend time with your aging family or your aging parents or spend time with your family later on. But if you miss out with what there is now and something tragic happens, then you never got to do it ever. And
Mhm.
so having the ability to just kind of slow down and see the beauty now, I think that's actually a really great thing. And so yes, I have not had the opportunity yet to go and see this statue in person. But now if I ever have that opportunity, I think it's just going to have that much more of an impact knowing some of this and how it's just how it developed and having this analogy put with the rest of the stuff that we've talked about today. So today and in the last, 100 weeks that we've talked about this. So yeah, let's move on to the next thing. Otherwise, it might be a 2 hour session.
Mhm.
But thank you for sharing that part of you because that is one of those things that it's like, this isn't just stuff we talk about. It's real, and
Yeah.
it has purpose, and it has, a reason for us doing this. So
Yeah. Before we move on to the next episode that we're going to talk about, I do have one more point I want to
okay.
say. I'll make it very brief. But at one point, you said something along the lines of like when he was chiseling that marble, the statue of David was already in that marble, but he
Yes.
had to just bring it out, right? Any of you who's listening, especially the newer coaches or the coaches who've been doing this for a while, and they're trying to scale, but it's been a little bit of a challenge for you, right? I want you to know that you already have it. That thing or that version of you that you're like, if I was just more charismatic, if I was just more driven, if I just knew how to market better, all of those things, right? You already have that in you. You do. May not feel that way, but you do. It's just about finding the ways to bring it out of you, right? And I think that's really important to remember because sometimes people go into, careers or they go after a passion and they have those imposter syndrome thoughts to where they're like, well, I'm not good enough. Like, that's not me. I can't be that type of person. Those are all just lies. Like, you can be anything or anyone that you want to be. You just got to accept that it's already there and you just got to bring it out. Because if you don't believe that it's there, then you're never going to bring it out, kind of thing, So that was just the last thing I wanted to say around the statue of David.
Yep. No, that's cool. I mean, we could have a full-on discussion about like the spirituality of all of it as well, but we might as well just do a whole nother episode at that point. So
True.
about how we were created and how that's, some of the hardships that we go through. Those are the chiseling away by our creators. There's all sorts of stuff we could talk about. But I appreciate you adding all of that other stuff. And if we ever want to talk about it again, we should. Or we can go back and just listen to episode 129 and see what we talked about the first time. Maybe we hit all that. So
that's right.
All right. So what is one of the ones that really stuck out to you over the last couple of years? Well, last year, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, you're going to laugh at this because it's very on brand for me. But one of the ones that I chose was episode, what number is this? 169, episode 169. And it was titled Motivation versus Consistency.
Oh, yeah. That has nothing to do with you.
I know.
Aren't those like your middle names?
Yeah.
It used to be motivation, but you didn't like it, so you changed it to consistency.
Yeah, exactly. So with the last episode that we discussed, you kind of brought it up. You gave a general, idea of like what the episode was about, and then I kind of like gave my input. I think that we should do that with this as well.
Okay.
So you give your input, I give the general thing, and then move on. So that episode really focused around the idea that, especially in our culture now, we hear and we see people really focusing on being motivated to start their business, being motivated to lose weight, being motivated to pay off debt, being motivated to do anything, right? We have motivational speakers. We have, people who get hired into, sports teams or businesses that come in to motivate and all different types of things, right? But if we're being real, motivation does not stick.
No, it's fleeting.
I want you to show me one person that has been consistently motivated forever. It doesn't exist. Even the most successful people are not motivated at all times. They might say they are, but they're not. So it's a very fleeting emotion. And that's why I don't really like motivation, because it does come and go. But one thing that doesn't come and go, as long as you stick with it, is that consistency, right? That's the thing, that it doesn't matter how you're feeling, doesn't matter what's going on. If you choose to be consistent, that's what's going to really serve you and allow these things to actually come to fruition. So with that being said, that's the overview. I'll turn it over to you. What are your thoughts? What was your biggest takeaway, whatever it might be, from this topic?
Well, I chuckled a little bit there because that is one of the things that I have to consistently chisel away at for myself.
See what you did there.
I know that there's a consistent person inside of that marble. I know there is, and
That's
I
right.
just keep looking for her. No, I actually agree with what you just said. I think part of the distinction is that motivation is more of a feeling, and consistency is more of a behavior. And
Yeah.
so we oftentimes we can sort of control our feelings. I mean, what I mean by that is we can control how we react to our feelings, but we can't really stop them from becoming. We can just be in them.
Hmm.
With behavior, we have a little bit more control over that. We should have a lot more control over our behavior. We do know that behavior is oftentimes connected to the way we feel about something. And I would say that because of that connection, when somebody is feeling motivated, they are naturally more consistent with something. And that's where you see the person who, goes to the gym for the first 3 weeks and they're really consistent about that because they're motivated. It's when you get to that fourth week and the fifth week when the motivation wears off, are you still willing to do the behavior anyway?
Hmm.
So I think that that's probably where that big distinction comes in, where it's like, consistency, but it's still a choice. And you did make that distinction. You said it's a choice. And I think that's why people, even myself, will struggle with consistency, because it's still something that you have to decide each and every time to get up and do the thing. I will say also that sometimes I don't give myself enough credit, and I'll bet there's other people out there who do the same thing. There are some areas where I am super consistent,
Hmm.
and I don't always focus on those. When I admittedly say, oh, that man, I struggle with consistency. It's me focusing on the stuff that I haven't been consistent with. And as I speak this out loud, I'm like, I think maybe there's a lesson to be learned in where the consistency is and how to apply that to where it's not. And so those are some of my first thoughts as you talked.
Yeah. Well, I love that you said that motivation is more of an emotion, whereas consistency is more of a behavior, because it's true. It's very, very true. And you alluded right to the gym, the going to the gym kind of thing. I think that's probably the most relatable for anyone. It doesn't matter if
Hmm.
you're overweight or fit. Like, going to the gym is just important. Period.
Hmm.
Um, but that consistency is a lot easier when you're motivated. The key is that when that motivation goes away, to
Right.
stay consistent, which is
Right.
1,000% correct. Um, if I could just say like one thing about success with building a practice, with losing weight, with paying off debt, whatever it might be, it would be this: the most success that you're going to find, and and also the most successful people, um, we find that success through the mundane. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is all of those little things that aren't exciting, aren't sexy, but really, really important.
Yep.
Staying consistent with those, that's what makes you successful. It's not about having the best idea or going after the next best thing or whatever it might be, because that's what creates inconsistency. Is you kind of hop from one thing to the next. But it's just like, these are the things that I know are going to bring me 80% of my forward progression, even if they're mundane, even if they're boring, even if I don't like it. If I keep doing it consistently over and over and over, I will find that success. And that's where it lives. So
Hmm.
it's the
Yep.
prospecting, it's the marketing, it's all those things that maybe you don't like, but that's the pathway to get to the business and also the life that you do really, really love, you know? So
Yep. Have you read I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi? If
uh,
I'm saying his name correctly.
yeah, I haven't read it. I did watch his Netflix special though. It was good.
Okay. I have not seen anything of his, but that was the book for our book club this last month.
Okay.
And it's just funny because as you were starting to talk and you talked about some of the mundane things, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to bring up this book and then remind people that it's not about the sexy stuff and it's the 85%. And
Oh,
as
well,
I'm
there you go.
thinking it, like you're saying all of the things, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe I don't have to say that anymore. So never mind. I don't have to repeat everything you just said. But that's exactly where I was going to go with that. And that he talks about that in terms of investing. But as you were speaking about gym and stuff, I'm like, yeah, that's where it is. It's in the consistent thing that's, and the 85%, I think that's one of my favorite parts about what he was talking about and then what you're talking about. We could get stuck in trying to do the 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes when we try to do that, we do 0%.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like if you just do the boring and do it long enough, well enough, you'll get good enough results. And that's what I heard you say.
Yeah. And also, like, a lot of what success is too is just outlasting people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. You've
and
talked about that before and
we
100%
have,
agree.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
it's the people who are consistent who do outlast the
Mm-hmm.
others, so it's so important. It's so
Yep.
important. So
Yep.
that's that for my first episode. Sound good?
Okay. Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Let's
So
move
now we're
back
going
to
to
the
go
work.
back to the beginning. Not really, but the second one that I want to talk about is episode 152, and it's called Start with What You Have. And so that's what I mean by going back to the beginning. But it's not really going back to the beginning. Once you've figured out who you are and you've started to do things consistently in your business, the reason I like this episode so much is because I think it goes right along with what we just talked about. When we want to do something new, such as start a coaching business, it is so, so tempting to go, well, I need to have the best website and I need to have this particular thing in place and I need to do this and I need to do this. And we get lost in all the things that we need to do, all the things we need to gain. And this could be this one of my favorite things was when I was helping one of a friend of mine. She was trying to set up her, it was a baking business. And she's like, well, I need all of these things and I don't have the money for those things. I'm like, well, let's just start with what you have. Well, I need to be able to ice the cupcakes. Well, what have you been icing the cupcakes with for the last 2 years? Well, just put a little hole in the bag and I ice the cupcakes. And I said, okay, well, let's start with that. And she's like, no one's going to pay for that. I said, everyone has already told you they'd pay for the cupcakes as is. Let's just start with that and see what happens. And then when you sell a few, then you can buy an icer. Like that's how we can do this. And sure enough, that's what she did. And she was able to build her business and now she's very successful. And so it's really kind of just a reminder for us as financial coaches, entrepreneurs in general, start with what you have. You have mentioned real estate investing, and I actually had a chat with you the other day about that on the
Mhm.
side. And we talked about how your portfolio will grow to however many, but it's so important to start with one. Like just start
Mhm.
with one. And if you don't have the money to start with one, then you just work to save up the money to start with one. So we have to start with what we have. Otherwise, we'll never get started. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest takeaways from that particular episode was it's either start with what you got or don't start at all.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know what's funny is I just started with a new client yesterday, and I had
Mm-hmm.
a conversation that was very similar to this. Because we started talking about like their relationship with money and all that kinds of stuff, and at one point in the conversation, he was telling me about how he really avoids budgeting in general.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I really don't like messing things up. I have to have it be perfect. And, I've tried doing it in the past and it doesn't work out perfectly. And then I get really discouraged and I just avoid it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that that's a big part of this is like that whole idea of like perfectionism,
Yep.
right? Like everything has to be perfect before I
Mm-hmm.
actually start. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, first and foremost, perfectionism, in my opinion, is just a fancy word for saying, "Hey, I have certain insecurities.
Yeah. I'm
You know,
afraid of something. Mm-hmm. So
I'm
cool.
not confident. I don't believe in myself. Whatever it might be, right?"
Yep.
So it's just a really fancy way of just saying that. Um, but if you never actually get started, then how is it going to be perfect? like,
Well, if you never get started, you're not able to disappoint yourself. You are, but you're not. So if you're really insecure, like you say, I mean, yes, we know that ultimately we'll disappoint ourselves, or whoever we're talking about will disappoint themselves. But there's this trick that our mind plays. It says, if I if I don't do this, I will lose out on the opportunity for success, but it also means I'll lose out on the opportunity for failure. It's counterintuitive. I know it's not true, but that's
yeah,
the
you
trick,
disappoint yourself. You won't disappoint yourself in the moment,
right?
right?
Right? But your
But when you're
future
80
self.
years old sitting on your front
Right.
porch in a rocking chair,
That's
you'll
right.
look back and say, well, I wish I would have done that.
Yep.
And then you'll feel the real disappointment,
Yep.
and it will be amplified and compounded over decades of you not actually doing it. You know what
Yep.
I mean?
Yep. It's
So,
like the exact opposite or reverse of what you were just talking about with having to scale back for your family so that you don't get so frustrated at the end that you
mhm,
didn't spend the time with your family. So it's that, but in reverse and in
correct.
the non-motivated, inconsistent part of it. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I've heard this term thrown out there. I can't remember who it was. It was a different financial coach, but they use the term like messy action, to where it's like
Mm.
it doesn't have to be clean, it doesn't have to be perfect and
Mhm.
shiny. What's important is that there's just action done,
Mhm. Yep.
and I think that that's like super super great. I would even double down and say that there's something that I kind of have adopted from a guy named Andy Frisella. He's actually the creator of 75 Hard and all that kinds of stuff. He has this kind of like mindset mantra that he calls aggressive patience,
Mm.
which basically is like, it's the idea of being totally like almost like surrendering the larger outcome, whereas the short term stuff you're like all in on, kind of thing. So for
Mm.
example, if you're focused on your building your practice, let's just say, and you have the goal of like making it a full-time thing or making it a six-figure thing or whatever, when you're first starting out, it might seem like that might take forever and you'll have to do a lot of work, and you question if you can't even do it and all that kinds of stuff. But the patient side of things is basically accepting the fact that it's going to happen. It's gonna happen. It's not a matter of if, it's more so a matter of when. And it
Mhm.
doesn't matter when it does happen. If you build a six-figure business and go full-time in 1 year, great. If it takes you 5 years, great. If it takes
Mhm.
you 10 years, great. It doesn't matter. It's just gonna happen, right? And
Mhm.
that's the patient side of things, of like surrendering the outcome kind of thing.
Mhm.
Whereas
Mhm.
the aggressive side of things is more so like, hey, every single day, I'm going to shrink my focus and I'm not going to worry about that six-figure full-time business. I'm not going to think about it in terms of years or months or weeks. I'm just going to focus on winning today. And what do I need to do today to move the needle just a little bit to get a little bit closer to accomplishing that goal? Not to accomplish it, but to
Mhm.
get closer to it. And if I just focus on doing those one or two things every single day, and I don't worry about what happened yesterday, I don't worry about what's happening tomorrow, and I win that day, that's going to be really important, because the next day, I'm not going to worry about what happened yesterday. I'm not going to worry about what happened tomorrow or what's happening tomorrow. I'm just going to focus on today. And if we build up those small, wait for it, consistent wins, they start stacking on top of each other, and then they become those big wins, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of aggressive patience is big picture stuff. You're not really worried about it. You kind of surrender the big picture, but you don't surrender the process, which is the
Mhm.
small picture stuff. It's the
Mhm.
mundane stuff. It's the
Mhm.
consistency stuff. It's all that kind of stuff. So it kind of goes back and forth between this episode and the one that we just got done talking about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I must have been speaking to you telepathically through the computer, because I was like, I'm going to use the word process in just a second. And then you use that word. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you're killing me.
I'm on it.
The reason I'm going to use that word is because that's how, I mean, I have never followed the individual that you just mentioned, but that's one of the things that I have always tried to do is focus on the process over the results. And that's kind of how it was taught. What I love though about what you just said, and I'm just going to totally adopt that, that whole idea of focusing on process over the result was missing the part about where you just are going to surrender the idea that, I mean, you're going to surrender to the idea that it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And surrender has been one of the things that I've been working on very, very strongly in my personal life.
Me too. For the last
It's
2 years.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
since we started these episodes. And that is, so when you say that, I'm like, that resonated with me. I was like, yes, I understand the surrender. But I think what's so extra beautiful about what you just discussed was that you're surrendering the idea that to the idea that that result is absolutely going to happen. You're giving time for that. Like you're no longer married to the idea of what timeline that's going to be on.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one piece that I think was missing from the whole idea of just process over results. Because what happens is when you focus just on the process without the results, it's easy to forget about what you want that ultimate result to be. It's easy to lower that standard for yourself. And I know that I have done that. And so sometimes that doesn't always work, but I think this is going to be one of those key changes. It's just one tweak to what I had learned before. And now I'm learning this differently. So I hope our readers, if y'all are reading all this, it's good luck to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that our listeners also hear that slight distinction, because I think that really does make a huge difference.
Well, it's a massive difference, and this is the last thing I'll say before we move on, but it's a massive difference because if you're so fixated on the finish line, you're going to get like discouraged of where you're at now. You're going to get overwhelmed with all the things you have to do. You're going to feel paralyzed because you don't want to mess things up, and those perfectionism things will start to creep in. All of that happens when you're so fixated on the finish line. But conversely, if you just say, hey, I know what the finish line is, but I'm going to put my time, my energy, my resources, my focus into what's in front of me today, and I'm going to do that every single day consistently, well, you'll look up one day and you'll be like, wow, I'm actually halfway there. And then you'll look up the next time, you'll be like, I'm almost there. you know? And it's like, well, how did that happen? I wasn't focused on the end goal. How did that happen?
Right.
Well, it happened because you were focused on just consistently building this every single day, shrinking your focus.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify, I think one of the biggest differences between what I had been, I don't know, maybe I heard it wrong, but what I had been taught before versus what you're saying now, it's not that in that scenario you were encouraged to focus on the results. In fact, it's the exact opposite. You were encouraged only to focus on the process. I think the biggest distinction, Cody, is that there was not a true definition of what that result would have looked like. And that you have been able to surrender to what that result is, but you had to also define it. And that was the piece that I think is revolutionary, which is, it sounds so simple. But that's the one thing where it's like, it's okay to surrender to that, but don't forget about what it's supposed to be. Be okay defining what that is. And you don't need to define the timeline, but define what that is that you're actually after, so that when you are halfway there, because without having that, you don't know when you're halfway there.
Super important part right there, for sure. Yeah. Cool. Good stuff.
Yeah. Now we're on to yours.
Yep.
Bring it home, buddy.
It's the last melon. It's an Ice Age reference for anyone who watches Ice Age. The last melon. I digress. So the next episode that really stood out to me, which I feel like I've been talking about this a lot recently, because maybe it's a recency bias thing, but it's also just been something I've been kind of going through this year in particular. And that would be episode 181, which was, the exact title is something about ebbs and flows, persevering the ebbs and flows, right? Yes, that's what it was. Yeah, so general overview of that is, for those of you who've been listening for a while, I mean, you know the story about how when I first started this year, my first quarter, so January through March, was the worst quarter that I ever had. And I've been doing this for 5 years. And there's a couple reasons for that. But regardless, it was my worst quarter. And talk about someone who, going back to our very beginning of our conversation on this podcast, super driven, really ambitious, wants to beat myself all the time. I was in a very low place, mentally, emotionally, financially. I had a paycheck at one point, and I cut myself a paycheck every 2 weeks. That was a whopping $87 for 2
Wow.
weeks.
Barely go out to dinner with
Right.
that.
Right. Like,
Mhm.
and my mortgage is $3,000. Like that's not going to do anything. So it was a really tough place. But since then, my second quarter, as it's coming to a close now, has actually been my best quarter that I've had in the last 3 years, or in the last 5 years.
Mm.
So there's like those ebbs and flows moments, and it's just about persevering through those ebbs so you can get to the flows. And I think that that's like so important, because in those ebbs, that's where most of us throw in the towel. So
Mhm.
that's the overview. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts?
Well, one thought is that it was the first quarter of this past year that you had the worst quarter. And it was also just a few months prior to that your wife said, "Can we pull back a little bit on some
Mm-hmm.
of this?" And I know that sometimes there's that whole tail from their decisions that we're making. And I know that there's no regret for what you had done. You needed to do that for your family, but what that first quarter was showing you, okay, when you're not showing up consistently for these
Mm-hmm.
certain things. Now, could you have pulled back and still been consistent in some of the main areas? Probably. And
Yep.
maybe there was too much of a pullback in the wrong areas, but it felt really natural at the time. And it didn't feel like it had an impact on you because you were still reaping the benefits from your stuff before, your actions prior to that.
Yep.
But then you hit that first quarter, and then it's like, oh, this is going on. And it would have been very easy for you just to get frustrated. It would have been easy for you to blame your wife. I know you would never have done that. But to say, oh, see, I know I need to do this, and I need to hit it hard every single time in order to have this consistency. But that's not what you did. You looked back and said, okay, what was different? And what can I do in order to, when we're in this ebb, in order to say, how will I make the next quarter better? And clearly, if this has been your best quarter ever, I mean, talk about doing the two extremes right next to each other.
This
It's like
year's
your
been
worst
wild.
and your best. So, if nothing else, this will be a good lesson for you to know that this is your best one. The next one might not be your best one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. Like there is that ebb and flow. And I know it's only been about 19 episodes since we talked about this, but the idea of recognizing that it's going to happen, preparing ourselves for that, and being okay with it, but also working to get through some of that, so recognizing that what we do today will have an impact 5, maybe 10 weeks or months from now. And so just kind of those lessons that are in there, those are my initial thoughts as you shared.
Yeah, and so you said like the first quarter may have been a process of, or not a process. It may have been
Like a result
a
of
result. Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
A result of me not being consistent, right? That's what it was. I could have been more consistent with it, with still scaling back and everything like that. But I chose not to. I
Mhm.
chose not to. And looking back, that's what caused everything, you know?
Mm. Mhm.
Um, but I think that it's like, I mean, I don't want to keep talking about consistency, even though that might be the root of pretty much everything in life. But I think that it's really important to discuss the idea or the concept that it's in those ebbs that we tend to throw in the towel,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially for people and coaches who are maybe in their first year or maybe first 2 years of doing this. You don't have those systems in place. You don't have that traction, quite built up the way that it really could be quite yet. You don't have that network of people who follow you, who know you, that like you, that trust you, who, give you those reviews, who give you those referrals. You don't have that quite yet. So when you go through all of those challenging times, it can be very easy just to be like, well, maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe this isn't
Mhm.
meant for me. Maybe I should be doing this job instead. When really, if we just push through it and we keep going, it can get us into that flow state, and it can give you the life that you really want, or it could give you the impact that you could be making into these lives of the people that you really want to. It's just about pushing through it, you know? So
Yeah.
if you're listening to this today and you're going, hey, like, that's where I'm at right now. You know, I only have 2 clients right now, and their coaching program is coming up in like 2 months, and I don't have anyone else lined up. What am I going to do? Like, it's just all about those moments where it's like we have to recognize that and understand this is a part of, again, the process. The
Mm-hmm.
process.
Mm-hmm. If I may, I mean, that was very motivational.
See what you
But if
did
I,
there again.
no, it was really good. And I kind of feel bad for doing this right now, but I'm going to. I'm going to go to the concrete part for a second. You mentioned that there was one time when you paid yourself $87.
Yeah.
And I just want to point out to our listeners a couple things because I want them to be able not just to walk away feeling motivated and, pumped up, but I want them to walk away going, I have some sort of process in place that I can do this. And so I just want to remind anybody who hasn't been an every weeker that you and your process, you feel extra driven by that
Pressure.
yeah, I was going to say by the scarcity, but I didn't want to because that does not really, pressure is a better word. Yes, for sure. When you don't have that, when that $87 comes in, you're like, oh, I got to feed my family. Like, what am I going to do? You're driven by that. There are some people who aren't. And so I just want to let everybody know here that Cody makes a really good amount of money doing his coaching business. The $87 did not have to be an $87
No.
week or month for him.
No.
It could have been consistent throughout all of the other months, but when he has like a $10,000 paycheck, he takes the full $10,000 because that's how Cody, it's how he manages his stuff, which
Mhm.
is great. I mean, you, and I love
Yep.
that. But I'm just pointing that out to our listeners because if you are just getting started or if you're in the throes of it, but you need to have a more consistent income, you can set that up. You can set your system up so that very much like a real estate agent who has a month where they sell 4 houses and they're making bank, but then 4 months go by and they don't sell a house and they're like, I don't have any food on the table. Well, that's because they blew through the 4 house, commission that they got in that first month. So what you can do is actually set up a system where you have that money set aside specifically for your draw, if you will, and draw from that every single week, every other week, however you need to do that. But you can set that up so that you're not feeling that pressure quite as much. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case anyone's looking for something concrete to grab onto when they're setting up their systems.
Yeah. It's a good point. It's a good point. And you know what else I'll even double down on is like, so you said like that $87 check, it didn't need to be if I would have set up that system to have it be more consistent, which you're absolutely correct. But I'll even double down and say that it didn't need to be an $87 check because I also have a system in place for those moments. You know, I have an
Mm-hmm.
emergency fund
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
my business. I could have very easily pulled from that
Yeah.
and just made it more of like a normal kind of thing.
Yep.
But I chose not to.
Yep.
And
And I
that was
actually knew
by
that about you.
design because I just know how I am. Like I
That's
knew
it.
like if I were to just take that like, and it might not be this, but it is for me. If I were to take the quote unquote easy route and just
Mm-hmm.
pull from my emergency fund for these moments, that I would be comfortable.
That's right.
And I knew that
Yep.
that's not what I needed in that moment. I needed to feel the pain
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
make an adjustment. And that's what I did. And that's what caused the next quarter to be the best one.
That's right.
Mhm.
And there are many people who are listening who are built just like that. So if that's
Mhm.
you, do just what he did because and that's why it's so important because you know who you are and you know what's going to drive you. But there are some people who I've met, who when they have that pressure or they have that's like all of a sudden it looks very scarce, they go into panic mode, and then they no longer have the creative process. They're not able to actually show up where they're supposed to show up. When they're sitting knee to knee with a client, their mind is on themselves and not on the client. And it actually has a negative effect. And they end up with the worst quarter versus the best following that type of quarter. So just know who you are. That goes back to the beginning, right? Who's that David inside? Know
Yep.
who you are, know how you work, and be okay with that. And then set up your systems accordingly so that you can have consistent success throughout all of that.
Yep. Love it. Alrighty. Well, guys, thank you for hanging out with us today for our 200th episode and celebrating, just us looking back at some of the stuff that we've talked about, really doubling down on them, reiterating them. If you haven't had the chance to listen to those episodes, I would strongly encourage that you do. We go into much more detail on those things, and you'll get a lot of value from it. But again, we just want to say thank you for supporting us. We've been doing this for, I would say, like a little bit over 3 years now.
Well, it's 4 years, right?
Almost four. Almost 4 years.
200 divided by 52.
Yeah,
it's almost 4.
Almost 4 years now. And you know what? It's been one of those experiences to where every time that we hop on here and we record a new episode, I get a lot of value from it as well. And I just want to say I appreciate you, Maria, for being that type of person that I can share that with. It's been a really good journey, and our friendship has definitely grown throughout this whole process too. I don't know if we would be, in fact, I do know we would not be as close if we weren't doing this.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And it's just a really cool experience. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for supporting us. Hopefully you got value from today, and you continue to listen, share the show, leave a rating, whatever it might be. But we'll catch you in that Facebook group if you haven't joined in yet. Say hi, and we look forward to the next 100 episodes with you guys as well. So until then, you guys just keep fighting, keep building, and keep doing the good work that you're meant to do for yourself, for your family, and for your clients. So,
amen. Thank you so much. All right. We'll see you guys at the next one.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching.